Tonight I'm going to talk further about the Ravens and split field coverage. You can see here that Jacksonville is in empty formation, 3-by-2. We'll watch the play. Then I'll do my best to break down what's going on so far as the coverages to either side. To begin with, and just in a general sense, to give a definition of what I'm talking about when I say the Ravens are playing a split field coverage. Split field coverage is the defense having the ability to play separate coverages that are independent of each other, and they're to opposite sides of the offensive formation. To the top part of our screen, against the 3-receiver side, the Ravens are going to play a coverage called special. There are elements of man coverage as well as 2-read that is sort of tweaked, just a little bit different to the top part of our screen. And the Ravens are playing a coverage referred to as cut to the bottom part of our screen, the 2-receiver side. Looking into the coverage being played at the top part of our screen, typically you would number these receivers outside in 1, 2, and 3. You'll note that I have this identified as the number 1 receiver, and the receiver closest to the line is number 2. In this coverage, the Ravens are basically eliminating the outside receiver, sort of splitting the split field, if you will, by opting to play man coverage against him and then a slightly different version of 2-read here against these 2 receivers. So we'll focus primarily on the 3-over-2 coverage concept, and if we can, for the time being, just ignore this outside receiver. With this new numbering system, Marlon, in effect, becomes the outside corner. He has the new number 1 receiver man-to-man unless the new number 2 runs an out route within 5 yards. If that happens, Marlon's job is then to switch off of this receiver and take number 2. That doesn't happen as this number 1 runs a little hitch and the number 2 inside receiver runs a vertical route. I do think it's interesting, and this is a little bit of a wrinkle, how Marlon plays this man coverage. Notice he almost plays a zone over this new number 1 route. He plays this very well, and it's a little soft on this receiver, but it is to defend against one of the weaknesses in this coverage, that being both of these receivers running outs, which in this case would force number 18, Roquan Smith, to have to play catch up behind one of these receivers. Moving to Roquan, you can see he's reading the number 2 receiver along with the deep safety. His job is to play him man-to-man except when 2 is out in the first 5 yards. His job then is to make an out call and then play man-to-man on anybody entering the flat. In the event of a vertical route, which is what we see here, Roquan's going to play a heavy wall technique from the inside and reroute him at the top of his route. We'll turn our attention to the safety. I think this is Brandon Stephens. He too is reading the number 2 receiver, the one closest to the line of scrimmage in this case. If 2 runs a quick out, he's going to look to rob 1. Otherwise, all of his attention goes to number 2 running vertical, and in that case, he has him in man. Should mention that while I'm referring to the coverage at the top of our screen as something called special, that does not mean that's what the Ravens call it. To the bottom of our screen, the weak side away from the passing strength, we have a version of cover 2 I'll refer to as cut. Off the ball, we see the corner reading into the backfield. So far as it relates to the route distribution, if there are any routes to the flat, that's Marcus's job. He would play a trail technique on number 1 vertical. If there are no routes to the flat, you see here the number 2 receiver break outside. At that point, that's Marcus's responsibility. On top of that, Marcus's job here is to get some kind of reroute. You can see he gets a little bit of 1, and you can see he extends his arm on number 1, but I don't think it's enough of 1. The quarterback does a little ball pat, shoulder fake, and Marcus bites just a little bit right there. Perhaps if he doesn't read that, he gets a little wider and squeezes or disrupts this route just enough. Our apex defender, in this case Patrick Queen's responsibility is to play number 2 in man unless 2 is out to the flat, at which point he's going to turn his attention to any crossers opposite and look to rob the number 1 receiver underneath. Chuck Clark's job, the safety, in this coverage, if I have it pegged correctly, is to play the number one receiver outside vertical. If one does not run a vertical, then he's going to bracket number two. So what goes wrong in this coverage? I should point out, and you can see it on your screen, that there is a lot more attention being paid to the opposite side of the field and preventing any kind of deep cross, particularly by this inside receiver by Chuck Clark, and not a lot being paid outside to his side. Chuck does shift his weight right there to the opposite side of the field. Chuck is clearly being read by the quarterback here, and if Chuck is doing more reading of what is to his left, that is the number one receiver outside, he may break on this ball sooner. I still don't think he breaks it up. This is an exceptional play by the quarterback. You'll not see one better. I'm sure the Ravens are thinking he's not going to throw this football outside to the running back. You see Campbell win early and get right in his face. That little pump he does, this is just really a thing of beauty, this throw. If Chuck breaks on it a little sooner, perhaps he gets this receiver out of bounds.